Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. China. Watching China these days requires interpretation, a little guesswork, and then be ready to be surprised. A man, a very powerful man, former member of the Standing Committee of the Chinese Communist Party, Zhou Yongkang, the highest ranking party member, to my knowledge, in state security in the previous Standing Committee. There have been rumors for months, talk, that he was under scrutiny by the new regime, Xi Jinping, for corruption, which is a grand way of saying he's no longer in favor. Suddenly an announcement by the party, formal investigation of Zhou Yongkang. Full stop. There are live fire exercises underway in the East China Sea, scheduled over a long period of time. Very, very unlikely that they'll come to a quick end, but right now the events point to interruption of commercial traffic because of the prominence of the live fire exercises. The Chinese PLA and Navy and Air Force exercising its muscle. Do these connect? Joining me is Gordon Chang of Forbes.com, my informant on East China Sea and Zhou Yongkang and the party, and we're very pleased to be joined by the political scientist at RAND Corporation, Scott Harold. Scott, I begin with you. Congratulations. You are a political scientist. I now hold you responsible for connecting the dots. Zhou Yongkang is under formal investigation. The military is exercising with live fire in a fashion that is striking. Do these events connect? Good evening to you.
Good evening, John, and to your listeners around the world, and to you, Gordon. John, it's an excellent question. As with all things in China, it's really, as you said in the outset, kind of up to us to try to divine connections, but we have to say, in all honesty, we don't know for sure. But one point that we can make, Xi Jinping is the chairman of the Central Military Commission. And if you are investigating and purging one of the most powerful men in China in charge of the security apparatus, and if formerly in charge of that security apparatus, you might want to know where your military forces are at any given moment, making sure they're not involved in any kind of coup activity or plotting. And knowing that you've got them off doing exercises, you can judge, are they where they're supposed to be? It's easy to know. Of course, this is the annual exercise season in China. The PLA recruits in the spring, trains in the summer, exercises in the fall, and then absorbs their lessons in the winter. So it's not unusual to see exercises at this time of year, but the scale and scope this time looks like it's much larger, and the impact on China's economy and its air traffic is substantial. So certainly looks like an unusual combination of timing, which leads a lot of people to wonder if there's a linkage.
Scott, the one thing that's interesting about China right now is that there's a lot of news coming out of the country. It seems to be coming at the same time. And from what we can tell, there are a lot of rumors circulating around the country, most of them ludicrous. They've got to be false. But nonetheless, the interesting thing is that you've got the Chinese people now really concentrating on a number of events, making linkages, some which may exist, some which may not. I think that this shows a very excitable population right now, and we're going into a season where it just seems that there's too much news about China. How do you view this in the broader context?
Well, I think one of the ways to view this in the broader context, Gordon, is really to draw some lessons that we saw in the aftermath of the downfall of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and that is that in a society that exists in an extremely non-transparent environment that's permeated by the fear of the secret police and the fear of falling afoul of powerful individuals who exist outside of a rule of law framework, rumor has to suffice because there is no reliable source of information. The media is state-owned. Reporters can be purged if they tell the truth. And so in that environment, rumor steps in. Now, one of the interesting things is when powerful men, which Zhou Yongkang was, he's been compared to the J. Edgar Hoover of China, if you will, although probably many more bodies from Zhou Yongkang lie under the ground. You know, in that environment, when a powerful man is no longer feared but can now be laughed at, mocked, when everyone can look at his house online and say, oh, this is how he lived, there carries some risks for the party's reputation, for the party's ability to cow the population again. Now we can see how they were. He was really just a man. He was a greedy man who didn't control his family, who allowed them to exploit and abuse his power. It minimizes rather than creates a mythos around the party and around the men who lead it. And so I think that's something that we saw began to happen after people realized that Saddam was no Superman, but was just an ordinary man who had abused Iraq. And I think we're beginning to see aspects of that now in China, and it could bode ill for the Chinese Communist Party's hold on power.
You know, Xi Jinping, the ruler of China, is attacking the patronage networks of other leading figures. And certainly Zhou Yongkang was allied with Jiang Zemin, a former leader. The question is, where will this stop? Will this stop after Xi Jinping has consolidated power, or will these other powerful figures in the party push back? Where do you see this going, Scott?
You know, again, with almost all of the questions tonight, it's a fascinating, interesting question that is only possible to answer with speculation. We've heard rumors that there was pushback against Xi Jinping's corruption purges by Hu Jintao, by Jiang Zemin. We've also heard that they signed off on this one. Do we have any credible evidence? Would anyone who really was in the know go around talking to foreign journalists? Would that information get out? I suspect it would not. So really, again, we too are dealing in the realm of rumor. But it's an interesting question. How far can this go? I think the Central Discipline Inspection Committee has said that this is not the end. If this is not the end, I think it's fascinating to think about the future. Do we possibly exist in a world where 3, 4, 5 years from now, every member of the former Politburo Standing Committee, all 9 of them, or all 7 of them, with the exception of the 2 who are on the current Politburo Standing Committee, could be indicted? Could Jiang Zemin himself ever been indicted, or his family? I mean, these are all powerful men who have linkages to enormous swaths of the Chinese economy. If you really wanted to reform the Chinese economy, you have to get the powerful families out of the state-owned enterprises. Everyone knows that. But there are obviously political risks to doing that, too.
Gentlemen, the first chapter of a thriller. I'll go very quickly because we don't have much time. Bo Xilai, before the fall and the disgrace and the punishment, he was associated with the 14th Army, is my memory. There have been doubts for some time about the loyalty of parts of the Army to the Central Committee. We now have Zhou Yongkang, who was a sponsor, a protector of Bo Xilai. We also have those reports over these last weeks of generals swearing fealty directly to Xi Jinping, unusually so, reported Gordon to me, Scott. So I line all those things up, and I think to myself, Xi Jinping is not confident that the army will follow him. He is not confident that it has its back. There's an element within the army, he can't find it, he can't reach it, that was scheming or talking to Bo Xilai as if he was the heir apparent, and Zhou Yongkang was part of that conversation. If you launch an anti-corruption campaign against a former powerful man, that tells me that you're still not confident of your own power. How do you like that, Scott?
It's certainly one of the two interpretations out, one of two or more interpretations out there, John. The other interpretation is you don't go after really powerful individuals in this kind of a system unless you know you're going to win, because it's too risky. I tend personally towards the latter. We've already seen that Xi Jinping has not only purged Zhou Yongkang, he's actually purged the former vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, Xu Caiho, and it's widely believed that the other vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, Guo Boxiong, is probably going to get purged too. In that case, I'd say those were the 2 top guys in all of the PLA under the last regime. I suspect that they are the biggest obstacles, and everyone else is a lesser included case. So I tend to view him as powerful and as certain that he can rely on sufficient capabilities and sufficient loyalty within the services to command their authority. But again, this is a non-transparent system, and our alternative hypotheses, we have to keep our minds open to them.
Scott, one little detail here. Gordon, you answered too. Does this look more and more like a cult of personality? Is that what's shaping up around Xi Jinping? Scott?
Yes, I think absolutely there is an effort to build up a strongman. The Chinese political culture has long talked about the need for a stronger leader than Hu Jintao, the last leader, and there are large numbers of Chinese people who will openly admire anyone from Adolf Hitler to Vladimir Putin and say, oh, we respect someone who is Lehigh or terrible, powerful, strong. Think Ivan the Terrible. There is that strain in Chinese political thought, and I think that is reflected in Xi's attempt to build himself up as a man of the people who has enormous prestige.
Gordon, Xi Jinping, cult of personality?
It looks very much like the beginning of the People's Republic in the 1949-1950s period.
Scott Harold, a political scientist at the RAND Corporation, Gordon Chang of Forbes.com. I'm John Batchelor.